What are you hearing from most people about the possibility of some playing football and others not?
Look, I think that's going to be a worst case scenario type situation. And as you heard the commissioner right there, Greg Sankey, say, ultimately, we're trying to stay connected here. They're still going to reevaluate everything at the end of this month, May, early June, and see where the country is. See if it is feasible to get players back on campus sometime around mid-July. But here's what I think is really interesting. When it comes to the lack of connection here already, guys, we are seeing some of these schools come out and say, oh, yeah, we're going to have students on campus in fall. We're prepared for football. We're going to plan to play it. Nobody really knows one way or the other, but I think some of these schools are coming out and saying these things so that it would be more likely to get student athletes on campus. As we all know, the football players come to campus before the students anyway. So let's say we're talking about a university that says they're going to have students on campus in fall when that semester begins. They may be already saying that just to see if they can go ahead and start that process of getting the football players back on campus. I'm not saying that football fuels everything, but basically football fuels everything here. And I think there's a major point to look at when you look around the country of some of these individual schools already making these statements that are not, said by an actual conference. These are schools coming out on their own saying this, which is why what the commissioner just talked about in that radio show could be more likely than we think.
I've thought that too. It's a horribly skeptical way to look at it, or cynical way, but I actually agree with you. I've had that thought as well. Bobby, you played at Ohio State. You host a show in Columbus, Ohio, so you're as connected to the Big Ten as anyone could be. I know the politics there a little bit as well. That conference sticks together. They pride themselves on sticking together. Could you see some of the schools going on and playing, if not all of them can?
That's the big question. You can see conferences doing it, one conference and maybe not another. You would think the Big Ten would all stick together, and that's the inclination that I've always had and I've always believed. But then I started thinking, Greeny, you have Maryland, one of the charter members of the ACC, now in the Big Ten. You had Texas A&M, Texas's longtime in-state rival. Now they're not in the same conference. They're in the SEC. Why? Because it's about money, and these guys are all a team. When it's good for everybody, when it's good to be a team, that's convenient. Marcus and I were on a team. We were defensive players in Dallas. We would go to dinners together. But I'll tell you this, I didn't put my fork on his plate and try to steal some of his steak, because that would have been the worst decision I made. So it's convenient for these schools to stick together when it works for them monetarily. If this doesn't work, I think you might begin to see a little bit of a schism in some of these conferences where some schools know they need to play and they might leave others behind.
What do you think, Swagoo?
Gee, take a second and think about the impact of what we're talking about. This, in a certain way, has forced the hand of the NCAA to pay attention to the fact that these schools and these conferences can make decisions unbeknownst to them and do things because of what's happening right now. It's forcing us to have a new conversation about college sports. The second thing is, you look at the economic impact of Laura and I being in the SEC, and I'm sure it's relatable to Bobby as well, being in Ohio. The economic impact of people outside of the school based on football season happening. The places and the things and the people that benefit off of this, so many industries that benefit off of this. This is going to impact everything about those states, about those towns, about those cities. So we're not just talking about getting the student athletes back to play football. Yeah. We're also talking about a whole industry around football, around these players being there and playing games that will suffer or either benefit from what they decide to do.
I have one more question for Laura, and I will grant ahead of time. It might be impossible to answer right now. But this is a sport that is made up of so many different entities, and so many different people have authority over their little piece of it. Ultimately, who will make these decisions? I mean, someone has to make these calls. Who has the authority to make them when all is said and done?
I want to say that right now it seems like it would be the actual states, like the governments of each state, and they're going to take a cue from that. I do think that commissioners will be able to preside over their conferences and make specific conference decisions, but who knows here? At the end of the day, what I do think is becoming more and more apparent is this will not be the NCAA's sole decision. They will advise in this, and these meetings that are happening right now every day obviously include the NCAA, but I don't think that this is just coming from them. It's going to be decided in each conference. One other thing, too, really quickly, guys, when you think about revenue generated in a conference, the revenue is shared. So even if you had a couple of schools that could not play because their states were not able to be safe for their players, you might still see these conferences say either way, they're going to get money from the other teams playing.
Yes, it's an interesting point. The Big Ten is spread out over 11 states. The SEC is spread out over 11 states. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.